What's in a question? Maybe just about everything important. A smart and sharp question should strike up a more engaging conversation. So let's talk about the next generation's perception on fairness. They're asking for it, but how does one even define and clarify it? Diane joins us in the studio for a discussion. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, hanging in there. It's a hump day. It's a hard day.
It's
difficult. How are you?
I'm good, despite the weather. It's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, humidity, nobody likes it.
Oh my God, I hate the weather being so humid.
Yeah. Dry heat. Is it better? I don't know.
So I live alone, so I don't have a dryer at my home.
Oh, no.
So it's horrible. When you're trying to dry your laundry, it doesn't dry.
Oh, no. You need a dehumidifier.
Right.
It's a headache, you guys, if you don't have a dryer. During the wet seasons, it's tough. This is a day-to-day being so light.
Yeah.
Let's provide our question of the day once more to all of our listeners.
All right, so question, what's your definition of fairness?
Oh, it's so tough, isn't it?
Right, I know. But according to this study or research, if you think of it, there are two different fairness systems in the country. And there are a lot of reports saying that the younger generations are asking for more fairness. But exactly which fairness they are rooting for has not yet been fully described.
Because it's hard to explain, isn't it? But it's worth talking about this recent survey and what they really want. When did the next generation start discussing and demanding fairness out of the society? I think that's important.
Right. So I think you can start by understanding when this newly coined word came to use back in 2015. They started to say 노력, meaning endeavors. It became a keyword in understanding the young Koreans today. It's not identical to an actual word endeavor, but its syllable is lengthened to emphasize the futility of hard work.
So not just 노력, it's 노력,
right?
Not just endeavor, endeavor.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So the word can be prolonged as much as one's frustration. So it shows how frustrated the youngsters are because as long doesn't matter how much endeavors you put in, you don't get a lot of results from it.
Okay, so no matter how much of a hard work you're putting in, you don't reap the benefits right away. So a lot of effort, not enough payout.
Right, and there's another discourse that calls our own country, the youngsters, they call our country as Haejosan, as the Washington Post and the Diplomat Institutes as well, and also blames the older generation who either is currently running the country or is responsible for electing them. The young Koreans are frustrated and hopeless as their hard work never pays off because the older generation has limited the social mobility, and it's now only the rich and privileged that get it all, according to them, even without having worked hard enough, if not at all.
So it's a completely different narrative of the young is entitled and they don't want to put in the hard work. It's a matter of no matter how hard I work, there seems to be no end to this.
Exactly.
So this is when the idea, the so-called spoon hierarchies was first introduced in Korea. 금수저, 흙수저, I think are the key words.
Right. Gold spoon.
Loosely translated, I think it's more silver spoon.
Silver spoon.
Like born privileged.
Yeah, exactly. Income inequality is evidently rising in Korea, especially since the Asian financial crisis, but they are blaming the wrong thing. The fault is not a lack of social mobility that people deplorably jeer at with the spoon theory. At least that's not the entire problem. It's part of the issue, but the narrative involving Haejosan, spoon theory, or 노력, endeavor, make people believe that they are the biggest and the only issue, distracting them from the real problem. They argue that the status of a person is predetermined by his or her parents' socioeconomic status, hence an unfair society to live in.
Okay, so 7 years have passed, and there was research done to find out what kind of then fairness the youngsters are seeking.
So, right, in 2022, 7 years later, the so-called MZ generation is raising controversy over fairness and insisting on going back from meritocracy. The neoliberal system that has spread since the IMF financial crisis has resulted in extreme inequality, but voices calling for structural changes are not easily unified. Behind the background of what young people say about fairness is whether everyone finds their own way themselves or living or demand for resolution of inequality.
Okay, so then let's get into the details of this study itself. What variables were specifically looked into?
So in the study, questions were asked asked in three main areas. One is parental support, relations to success. Two is active measures in employment. And three is tax policy that functions to redistribute wealth.
Okay.
So the survey was conducted on total of 3,000 citizens aged 18 to 69 on January 13th to 17th and May 4th to 9th this year through Gallup Korea and Data Spring Korea.
Okay, so to a question asking for a relation between one's parents' status and help and one's success, what was the result?
So they asked about their level of agreeability with the following sentence. Our society allows us to succeed as much as we put in effort without parental support. And as a result, based on the total respondents, 21% agreed with the sentence, whereas 57% opposed.
So majority don't believe that without parental support you can succeed.
Exactly. About 6 out of 10 people think that the family environment, such as parental support, is important for success in Korean society.
We're not just talking about monetary value here. I think, yes, it is about the finances and the paying of hagwons after schools, all of after school classes and academies and whatnot.
Right.
But it's also about, I think, how highly educated your parents are too.
Exactly.
Does that pave the way?
Right.
So what was so significant about people in their 20s and 30s and their answers?
So there was no significant response between the respondents in their 20s and 30s and those in their 40s to 60s.
Okay.
However, within the youth group, men were more inclined to consent to the sentence than women. While 26% of young men said they agreed to the sentence, only 15% of young women answered that they agreed.
So there's a bit of a gender discrepancy.
Right. So younger women are more likely to think that it's difficult to succeed without parental support as much as they have worked hard. So when looking at the response of the young respondent group based on their educational background, so they took this factor again, there was a noticeable difference in perception by gender in the low education sector.
Okay.
So 31% of high school graduates said they could succeed as much as they put in their efforts, but only 8% of high school graduates who entered universities said that they could succeed, but only 8% of high school graduates said that a full difference. So among the graduates of local private universities, 24% of young males and 11% of females answered that they could succeed as much as they put in the effort, which is still a big difference.
Okay, so another point of the survey and the questions that we want to look at is the question on fairness in the employment process.
Right.
Is it transparent? Is it fair? Does everybody have a fair shot?
Exactly. So next, the question was asked about what they think of measures to achieve equality in employment. Typically, the quota system in the hiring process is an active measure to realize equality in the slopping hiring market right now. When asked about the sentence, the local talent quota system should be expanded when hiring. About half of the total respondents agreed.
Let's talk about gender once again,
Right.
because someone gets a shorter end of the stick, seemingly at least, when there is kind of this artificial quota put in by companies.
Yeah, so when looking at the youth respondent group by gender, 46% of young women responded positively to the local talent quota system, more than 10 percentage points higher than that of young men. So 36% versus 46 versus 36.
Okay.
So young women also showed more support than young men when it came to the sentences blind recruitment, which is selected without looking at the academic background, career, gender, and more, should be expanded. And constant employment of non-regular workers is necessary for stable employment.
Okay.
So it seems like the younger generation does not have a more progressive attitude than the older generation in terms of employment equality measures. It was similar when you compare the youth generations to the older generations, but within the younger generation's gender, there was differences.
There was a difference. Now, last but not the least, taxing the rich people
Right.
particularly, it can be seen as one of the more effective ways of redistributing wealth for
Right.
fairness, according to at least these studies too. How was the response?
So regarding the increase in income tax for high-income earners, 12% of young people said they were against it. This is a 1 times higher than that of respondents in their 40s or older. So the percentage of respondents who agreed to consent was about 60 percentage points higher in the respondents in their 40s and older than in the younger respondents. So this indicates that young respondents are conservative in their tax payments by high-income earners.
Okay.
A similar trend was also observed for the inheritance tax increase. Regarding the increase, 35% of younger respondents and 33% of those in their 40s or older opposed to the increase.
Because Korea already has sky-high inheritance tax.
Right. But then if you think of it,
Yeah.
for those people who are arguing for fairness in the younger
Right,
generations, they
right.
would sort of support increasing the inheritance tax, right? But then this
Right.
was a little bit different.
It's kind of a contradiction, isn't it? Okay.
So when comparing the ages, there was no significant difference in the simple ratio. However, when excluding other variables, the younger age had the stronger opposition.
Okay, to increasing taxes,
Exactly.
inheritance tax
Right.
particularly. That's interesting because you would assume the otherwise.
Right, to redistribute wealth.
Right. In order to redistribute. Because you need to first collect taxes to redistribute more
Exactly.
to the lower income households. Now, the answer differed according to one's current wealth as well, of course.
Right. In particular, as a result of segmenting and analyzing responses to the income tax increase for high-income earners based on household wealth level, the perception gap between young people and those in their 40s and older was more significant in the respondent group with many assets than in the respondent group with fewer assets. So specifically, when looking at the group with household assets of 550 million won or more, which are considered as the top 25% of a nation, only 7% of those in their 40s or older opposed the high-income tax increase, while 20% of young people opposed.
Okay.
Overall, the lower the household assets, the more agree on the income tax increase were high-income earners, of course. And while the respondents in their 40s and older did not differ significantly in their positions depending on the size of their assets, the younger respondents took a more conservative attitude as they got richer.
That's interesting.
Right.
So they have a more conservative approach as they make more money themselves.
Exactly.
So when you're lacking, you want more just and a fair system.
Yes.
As you make more money, your perception changes.
Right.
I guess that's just natural to humans.
To humans, but to the younger generation, it's more vivid, I guess.
Okay.
The characteristics of the respondent group with many household assets are also shown in the question, our society can succeed as much as we put in effort without parental support. For those with household assets of 550 million won or more, 12% strongly disapproved of this sentence, which was 5 to 9 percentage points less than the dissatisfaction rate of the respondents with fewer assets.
Okay.
So the more assets you have, the more important it is to an individual effort to succeed.
Okay, so all in all, it seems like a younger generation isn't that far from the older generation, according to this study. So us labeling MZ as more just or
Right.
just seeking or fairness seeking, it might not necessarily be true.
Right, it might be a little bit prejudiced. The study showed that the younger generation, who are often portrayed as liberal minds, are not as progressive as the older generation. Also, the existing dichotomous frame of conservative male versus progressive female may make us overlook the commonalities of the younger generation who have embodied the worldview of their respective lives.
Okay.
This fear may have just emerged in the response as today's youth feel the cost of losing their resources is greater than those older generations.
You make it either bigger or you
Right.
lose big.
Exactly.
All right. So that's a food for thought because a lot of the headlines are misleading in that we seem to be living in a divisive society. But
Right.
some of these studies indicate that there are similarities there too with the older generation and the younger
Exactly.
generation. Diane, you opened up more questions for us to answer in the
Yes.
future. But thanks for the updates. I'll see you tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow.
And we have Sayan joining us for our People segment next.